I intend to speak in opposition to Obamacare. I intend to speak in support of defunding Obamacare until I am no longer able to stand. If it were a good thing, you would want the good stuff to happen before the election and not after the election.
We can't be special and exceptional without the American dream. And that's what's being undermined by big government and by Obamacare.
Under no circumstances should members of Congress be treated better than what we are doing under the law, forcing upon millions and millions of Americans.
We're asking for a dialogue. How do we get the dialogue unless somebody's willing to stand up and say enough's enough?
I would not have imposed on your time and energy if I did not believe this was an issue of vital importance to the American people. It's now late at night. I'm going to venture to say most members of the United States Senate are home in bed asleep, while America lives the nightmare.
That, at the end of the day, is why we're so passionate about this. That's why this is an issue worth fighting for.
Obamacare was told to the American people, if you like your health coverage, you can keep it. We now know that promise was simply, objectively, 100% false.
He stood on his feet for more than 21 hours and delivered a strong case as to why President Obama's disastrous health care law needs to be defunded. But it was more than that. Last night, Texas Senator Ted Cruz set an example for all lawmakers about what it really means to stand up for the American people. Now, later this hour, we're going to be joined by Senators Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and James Inhofe. But first, we have assembled a live studio audience made up of people from both sides of the aisle. They'll be with us throughout the hour. Guys, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Hello, Jamu.
Hello, Mr. Hannity.
I see Miss Tamara is there in the back. No happy candy tonight.
Ready to rumble.
Ready to rumble. Let me ask, regardless of what your political leanings and inclinations are, how many of you admired 21 hours and 19 minutes? How many admire it? 3 people don't. Why don't you admire? You don't admire the fact that he stood up, fought, couldn't go to the bathroom, couldn't leave, had to stand the whole time? You don't admire that at all?
Why would I admire a faux filibuster?
Oh, filibuster.
Yes, and he is my senator from the great state of Texas. And as the Dixie Chicks said about President Bush, I'm kind of embarrassed that he's from Texas. He could have stood on his head when
you know what?
The first rule for doctors is first do no harm. And that's what Senator Cruz
You know what I like? Even if a Democrat, if they really believe it and they're willing to put, 21 hours of their life on hold to do that, why did you admire it?
I admired it because it did take courage. You look at all the slings and arrows he's taken over the last couple of days on both sides of the aisle, from Republicans and Democrats. And count me as someone who believed at first we should step out and strip out the individual mandate, because that's the best perch from which conservatives can make the argument. But I was on the train this morning at 7 a.m., opened up my laptop and realized Ted Cruz is still talking. Yeah. Ted Cruz is still fighting. He's talking to Marco Rubio, articulating it.
I got up at 6 a.m. and I was like, if I was Chris Matthews, I would have had a thrill up my leg that he was still there. Yeah, go ahead. Billy Cunningham.
Sean Hannity. In 1836, Texans stood at the Alamo knowing they were going to be slaughtered by Santa Anna. This man is a modern-day Jim Bowie. He's Davy Crockett. He's John Wayne. He's standing against the forces of evil who make the fiscal status of this country illicit. I'm so proud of this modern-day Alamo fighter. He knows he's going to get killed. He knows he's going to lose, but he's not the French welcoming in the German army in 1940, crying as the German tanks come down the Champs-Élysées. This man fought like a warrior poet. He's my hero.
All right.
Let me respond to Bill. I'll tell you, because this is my best friend here. Do you know what Boehner is a modern day of? Do you know what Cruz is a modern day of? Modern day John Gacy, okay? They are raping the American people.
You sound like the president.
That is what the Republicans are doing. They're holding American.
You better take that back.
Raping the American people.
You hold on.
Tamara,
raping
wait a minute.
The American people by holding them hostage and tying Obamacare, to
name bomb budgets. You ought to take that back. You ought to take that back, and you ought to take that back. No, they're not. What's terrorizing the economy is America look like Detroit. That's what's terrorizing the American economy.
All right, one at a time.
Just so he can be a better candidate in
No.
2016.
He's doing it for principle.
All right, let me ask, for those of you that support what Ted Cruz did, let me ask a reasonable question. Brent Bozell said, Jennifer Stephano, that if you fund it, you own it. Do you agree with that?
Right. Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, everybody needs to own this, and I think the real results of Obamacare are going to happen in the 2014 election. I think the Democrats are on the ropes and running scared, and we have got to continue to focus not on the defund fight alone. There is a big issue here, and it is sitting in between people and their health providers, between their children and the decisions they have to make for them, and that is Obamacare. And we have to continue to drive a narrative, Sean, of not just this fight in D.C., it's the fight in the street of how bad this is for individuals. And you're going to see in 2014, this is going to come back and crush them.
Let me go to Tamara for 1 second. Could you use rape, hostage? What was the other term you used?
Republicans are standing between our legs. They want to control women's health care.
The popularity of Congress is at an all-time low.
And going down, Sean.
Let me go to Doug maybe on this. And it's at an all-time low. And here's a guy that believes in what he believes in, and he puts his money where his mouth is. I think this helps Ted Cruz, but it also embarrasses everybody else there.
It helps Ted Cruz if he's running for president. It hurts America because it's going to lead for a government shutdown, more chaos. The financial markets, which have been going down for 6 days, will continue to be in turmoil. We are at economic risk. What we're not hearing tonight, Sean, and we're not getting in Washington, is bipartisan consensus to make health care work for all Americans. Screaming doesn't solve problems.
Follow-up question for Doug. If you look at the polls, the American respondents equally would blame Republicans and Democrats.
Well, not good. The CBS poll,
39-37.
CBS poll was 44-35. Today, blame the Republicans. I was in Washington, Sean. I advised Bill Clinton. I told him he could get reelected in '96 if he fought the shutdown with Newt Gingrich in '95. He did fight it. He did win. The same will happen here. The Republicans will seize.
Gingrich won.
Sean. Gingrich did not win. He's out. And Clinton's reelected.
Won the debate in terms of
no, sir.
The era of big government is over. The end of welfare.
Yeah, and we won the battle because we did rope it down.
Let's bring a doctor in here.
Sean, I think that what's actually happening here is a spotlight is being shown on a very bad bill again. Whatever you think of what Senator Cruz is doing, that's what's happening, and we need that spotlight. You know why? Because what's happening in 2014 is hands are in the pockets of the taxpayers with all, if you look at the liberal press, they're saying, oh, don't worry, your premiums will be going down a little. But not only that, the government's going to be subsidizing it as though a subsidy is a good thing, or 40% payment out of pocket if you got a bronze plan on a state exchange. We're talking about a bill that stinks. So if currently we're putting a spotlight on it through Congress, I'm all for it. By the way, surgeons stand for 21 hours like that. I admire that.
All right, let me give some numbers. Hang on, Jamil, hang on a second. Let me.
What they are imposing is not the Affordable Care Act. You are wrong. You are wrong.
All right, wait 1 second. Let me give you some of the sticker shock. Wall Street Journal. Okay, these are real numbers, real people. You have a guy in Nashville, Tennessee, 27 years old, non-smoker. He pays $41 a month before Obamacare. It's going to go up to $114. If you got, likewise, the bronze policy and a guy in Philly, it's going to rise to $195 for the same 27-year-old, $73 to $195. In Wyoming, it goes from $82 to $271. Now those are, wait a minute, what happened?
30 million are still without, the whole idea of this was to get insured, the uninsured. According to CBO, 30 million are still going to be uninsured. A dismal failure, expensive, we can't afford it.
Jamil, you're saying not true, but the CBO did say that. The Congressional
Budget Office. The truth will set you free.
The reality is that once the Affordable Health Care Act takes place, that 6 out of 10 uninsured Americans right now are going to be able to purchase health care for less than $100 per person. This boils down to what type of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country where if you have a good job, you can get good health insurance, and if you don't, you get screwed?
The CBO also said, the CBO also said that it's going to lead us to bankruptcy, financial ruin. We can't sustain that.
Absolutely. And the question is what kind of health care? And the New York Times, which is not a bastion of conservative news,
reported a couple days ago that there are actually going to be lower premiums at what cost? And that is a very limited network of providers. People in the state of California who are participating in the exchanges will not be covered at any UC hospitals. And any of the doctors that are working in that hospital, you can't go to them as a specialist. So yeah, you might get a little bit of health care, but what their insurance companies are trying to do are trying to get around the pre-existing conditions part of the bill to say we're not going to cover complicated conditions. If you have to go to specialists or more than one doctor, sorry, we can't. And so prices are going to go up.
Very good point. You have the insurance card, but you don't have the doctors.
We'll take a break. We'll come back, and coming up, we're going to have more with our live studio audience all throughout the hour. Later, we'll be joined by Senators Rand Paul, James Inhofe, Mike Lee. Now, this is a must-see Hannity you can't afford to miss, and you can also respond at HannityLive.foxnews.com as we continue. And welcome back to this live studio audience edition of Hannity. And coming up, we're going to be joined by Senators Rand Paul, Mike Lee, James Inhofe. But first, we turn back to our studio audience. All right, Ms. Roginsky, let me go to you. The president said $2,500. Families are going to save $2,500 a year. Forbes magazine, $7,500 increase. That's a $10,000 swing. President today did something, and I got to give him credit. For those of you out there that say, I never give the president enough credit, I'm giving him credit here. He admitted he did raise taxes. Let's see, medical devices, more difficult to deduct medical expenses. The flex spending account, that's a $13 billion tax. Obamacare super saver surtax of 3.8%. Medicare payroll tax goes up. Individual mandate, non-compliance tax, employer mandate tax, health insurers tax, that goes in union members 2018 tax. So $2,500 savings becomes a $7,500 payout for families. Why shouldn't we hit the pause button, considering he was off by $10,000 a family?
I think, my friend, you are doing your audience, as is Ted Cruz, a tremendous disservice. You're letting
them... Telling the truth?
Nope. You are infusing them with some sort of deluded hope that this bill is ever going to be repealed under this president.
Is she answering my question?
I'm answering your question right now. You can rattle off, and I can start rattling off how people with pre-existing conditions will now be covered thanks to this bill. I can start rattling off how if you have cancer, your insurance can't resize you and throw you off the health care plan.
Let me stop.
So what you and I can compare? No, but listen, Sean.
But you got to listen to my question.
I'm listening to it.
Didn't the president promise $2,500 savings for family? He did, right?
Sean.
Did he?
I believe he did, yes.
Right. Now the average family is going to pay, now that we've gotten to this point, they're going to pay $7,500.
Well, actually,
wait a minute. That's a $10,000 swing.
I'm answering your question. Before Obamacare, I'll help you right now. Before Obamacare, the average family was paying $2,200 a year.
So we're not getting the savings.
Listen to me. Just to cover people who don't have health care because they had to go to emergency rooms. That charity care coming out of our pocket. So what I'm saying to you,
need an advocate.
you don't need an advocate, my friend. You don't need advocates. You need a reality check.
A reality check.
Stop telling people that it's going to be repealed.
His promise didn't matter. Betsy McCoy.
Yes, I'd like to address the accusations of arson, extortion, rape, hostage taking. In fact, what you're seeing is checks and balances. The framers of the U.S. Constitution didn't want an all-powerful president, so they gave only Congress the power to appropriate money, to tax, and to borrow. But this president refuses to negotiate. The idea was that the president has to go to Congress and negotiate in order to fund the government, or it gets shut down. James Madison, the chief architect of the Constitution, said in Federalist 58, if the president reaches for more power than he's supposed to have, stop funding.
Well, then you're raising an important point, and I'll throw this to Jennifer Stephano. Republicans, I'm disappointed, except for Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, yes, Marco Rubio, and Jeff Sessions, and James Inhofe, and Pat Roberts. I'm trying to get all their names. I'm disappointed that they are so fearful of being blamed for a government shutdown. Democrats don't have that fear. Why do the Republicans have this great fear?
Look, the Republicans continue to have trouble leading on this issue. Not to mention, Sean, we have another battle looming. The president is threatening to shut down the government over sequestration as well. The president is the one shutting down the government for the defund fight and on sequestration. The president has threatened and held hostage the 2% cut we asked the government to take and that we won last year. They're now going to let that expire because the president's threatening to shut down the government. They've got to learn to go out swinging and fight.
Deneen.
With all of the numbers and data that you rattled off and people continue to ignore it and pretend it's not true, our president lied to us. He lied to Americans. And what we witnessed with Ted Cruz is he was able to educate Americans. The base is empowered. I mean, when you think about it, with social media and the internet, people are getting their own information. It's the ground up. It's no longer top down. And that is what the establishment and the left hates. They're losing control, and it's very obvious.
Well, let me ask Ryan this question. All right, because this is important. I give Julie the numbers. I tell her what the president said. There's a $10,000 swing.
I gave you the numbers back.
Hang on. And that's the reality of where we are now, based on what he said when he was selling this to the Americans. He said it would be $900 billion. We're way beyond that. Right. Why is there this mysterious reluctance to even acknowledge the truth that those numbers don't add up?
Because right now the Democrats can't lose, and that's why they don't bother acknowledging it. I watched most of Ted Cruz's thing. I was up all night watching it.
Me too. You can see my eyes. You know.
And I'm a Republican, and it was great. It was exhilarating, but it kind of felt like for me a bit of a Seinfeld episode. I didn't understand the point, unless this is one big point, I mean, right now, according to Charlie Cook, Republicans have an 18-point advantage amongst independents. Yeah. And there's a huge, unless it was to rally the base for 2014 and to allow red state Democrats to have to re-vote for Obamacare again in Alaska and Arkansas and Louisiana.
You're saying what's the point?
Unless it comes up with an electoral victory.
Can I give you a point? Maybe this is what I got out of Ted Cruz, and I'll let others speak for themselves. I thought it was refreshing to see somebody that wasn't making political calculations, but was standing on principle. And by the way, every Republican ran on a platform to get rid of Obamacare and replace it, repeal and replace.
But in 1964, it took Ronald Reagan 16 years to win the 1964 election. Goldwater actually won in 1980. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 years, but this patriot stood and fought. He may lose now, but long term, he's going to win this darn thing. The Republicans were not hurt, despite what Doug says, in 95, 96. For the next 10 years, who controlled the House? And who won the presidency twice?
But Barack Obama was as happy, Sean, as you are.
But the country was better off.
You scream loudly, you say less. Please be clear. Barack Obama and the Democrats have only one strategy, which is to let the Republicans overplay their hand, let people like Bill go out of control, and bottom line, the Democrats who can't win the election will because of Republican overreach.
What you're saying is Democrats are happy if Republicans fight for their principles.
Yes.
And if Republicans cower, they're not happy.
Republicans will win.
I'm saying that clearly.
They're not happy if Republicans cave.
They want Republicans to bargain. Because if Republicans bargain,
he's the gold
government.
He is
if the Republicans stand firm, it's so out of touch with the American people, they will seize defeat from the jaws of victory.
Hey, will you tell Doug to shut the heck up because he's talking too loud? About me talking loud. You don't shake your finger at me.
We'll have much more with our kind of lively studio audience coming up later in the program. When we come back, Senator Rand Paul, one of Senator Cruz's biggest supporters, he'll join me live to explain why he took to the floor last night and early this morning and where he thinks this fight to defund Obamacare is going to go from here as we continue.
Why is the senator from Texas here today? To say to the president, we need to talk. But what does the president say? He says, my way or the highway. When the American people said they want dialogue between Republicans and Democrats, how do we get there? We have to stand up for what we believe in, so they will come and talk.
That was Senator Rand Paul standing with his Republican colleague, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, last night and early this morning. Joining me now live from Washington, Kentucky lawmaker, Senator Rand Paul. How are you, sir? Welcome back to the program. You must be I'm a little tired because I was up watching you guys late last night and early this morning. So I assume you're a little tired today.
Well, I think Ted did all the heavy lifting. I was the supporting cast. I was glad to be there some, but Ted Cruz deserves the credit for one heck of a long speech.
Well, it was not. What time did you finally leave last night? Because I know you were back there by 6 a.m. this morning, right?
I was there early, but really, Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and Mike Lee deserve the credit. They put most of the work in. The rest of us tried to support when we could, but they deserve most of the credit.
All right, before we get to the substance of this, you are now known for your own filibuster. The rules are pretty tough. You have to stand the whole time, no eating in the Senate chamber. You can't go to the bathroom. You have to be very technical in terms of the words you use so you don't give up control of the floor. That's a long time not going to the bathroom. Are certain, let's say, preventative measures made in cases like that? What do you guys do? Do you dehydrate yourself before you do this?
I'm not going there. You know, I don't know and have any answer to anything about that other than to say that I did have to stop because that was my reason for stopping, because nature was calling me, and that's why I stopped.
Thank you for sharing, Senator. We really appreciate it here. All right, on a substantive note, there, on the one hand, was really great excitement among conservatives watching this last night, saying there's somebody who's fighting, just like when you did it. And then you see where the rest of the Republicans are in this, and they're saying, no, we're gonna vote for cloture, which will then allow Harry Reid to strip the defunding measure from the House CR, and that means that it's going to go back to the House without that. That's disappointing a lot of people. Why won't they stand with you and Cruz and Marco and Mike?
Here's what I would say is that I've been traveling the country a lot, and everywhere I go, people want, you know, Republicans to win, conservatives to win. I tell them we need passion. So what you saw with Ted Cruz leading it, Mike Lee leading this, was passion. People sorely want us to stand up. For example, Benghazi. They're like, why won't someone stand up and speak truth to Hillary Clinton and ask her, did you order the Marines not to support our soldiers? People want answers, but they want someone who believes in something, who's unafraid to stand up and fight. And I think that's what Ted and Mike showed in this.
Okay, but they're asking, where are the rest of the Republicans here? Every Republican I know ran to repeal Obamacare. Now, I keep hearing that there are tactical differences. That's what I keep hearing. But it seems to me the tactical difference is, well, we can't do it now because we're going to be blamed for shutting down the government. So elect us in 2014, and then in January in 2015, then we might be able to do something when we have the House and the Senate. Well, by that time, I think it's going to be impossible to do anything.
You know, ultimately, I don't think it's a good idea to shut down government either. I'm not going to vote for 1 penny for Obamacare. I won't. I'm not going to vote for any spending bill that has money in it. But I also just don't want to shut down government because I think the disruptive nature of it. And I don't think it's our fault, frankly. The president says, oh, Republicans, they want 100% of what they want or they'll shut down government. It's actually completely the opposite. The president wants 100% of Obamacare or he's going to shut the place down. They won't even allow one amendment to modify Obamacare on the floor.
But I don't see the Democrats engaged in this fear. They see the Republicans blinking, and they're just getting more emboldened and stronger by it. Why don't you guys put it on them? Pass the bill, fund the government, don't fund Obamacare, and say if you want to shut it down, shut it down. Why not? Why not? Is this not worth taking a stand on?
Well, I think it is worth taking a stand, and I absolutely want to take a stand. No more money for Obamacare. But at the same time, I think that when we're trying to grow our party, it could disrupt and distract us if government shuts down and Social Security checks in and checks to soldiers in. So I don't want either situation. And I think really that by standing on principle, what Ted Cruz and Mike Lee did, standing on principle, maybe we force them to get rid of some of the worst parts of Obamacare. Maybe we don't ultimately win. All I'm being is a realist. Maybe we don't ultimately win, but what we say is, maybe we get rid of the medical devices tax. Maybe we get rid of the insurance tax. Maybe we get rid of the individual mandate.
I think what a lot of people want is for Republicans to fight, and meaning all of you. And it seems like this tactical difference, it's either now you stand up and you risk what the media and risk what the left will say about you being guilty of shutting down the government, or you wait till 2015 after an election that you may or may not win and you still have Obama as president. That's the difference. That's what I see the two choices as.
Maybe, but I think it's also important to say and to know that we are also battling against Democrats who are for funding Obamacare. Even with the differences within our caucus, and there are some, every Republican in our caucus is for defunding Obamacare. And I don't think it's fair to characterize some of them and say, oh, well, they're really for Obamacare. None of them are for Obamacare.
I'm not saying that, but they're not willing to fight.
I'm not saying you are.
And take it to the mat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that it's not fair to characterize people that way.
You see, you're willing to take it to the mat. Wait a minute. You're willing to stand with Cruz. Mike Lee, who's coming up, is willing to stand. I'm asking, where are the other 39 or 38 Republicans? Where are they?
You know, I guess what I'm trying to say, what's most important is, where are the 7 or 8 Democrats that are going to vote to fund Obamacare that
I don't
really
expect them to do the right thing.
Well, I know they're not going to, but I'd like to see them gone.
They didn't run on
repealing Obamacare. I would like to see them gone. So I think we need to direct some of our venom or some of our, you know, anticipation and trying to make things different towards getting rid of some of the voices that really are the problem here. And the problem is too many Democrats.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I agree. All right. Good to see you, Senator. Thanks, you.
Thanks,
Get some sleep tonight. Coming up next, 2 more GOP senators who stood with Texas Senator Ted Cruz last night. They'll join me from D.C. Senators Mike Lee and James Inhofe will be my next guests right after the break. And then later, we're going to turn things back over to our very lively studio audience. They're fighting in the breaks. And we want to hear from you. Join our special companion site, HannityLive.foxnews.com. Share your thoughts on this and much more. HannityLive.foxnews.com, on Twitter @Sean Hannity. And welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. While Senator Ted Cruz was speaking on the Senate floor for more than 21 hours trying to defund Obamacare, his Republican colleagues in the House were brewing up a story of their own. According to Politico, House GOP leaders are now considering tacking on a 1-year delay of the train wreck's individual mandate. So is that a good strategy? Here to talk about that, much more, Utah Senator Mike Lee, Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe. Guys, good to see you. I know you both were,
good to see you.
Neither one of you got any sleep either. Mike, I know for sure. What, did you get to bed last night?
No, I was on the floor all night with Senator Cruz, and it was a great experience.
Well, as I was dozing into La La Land, I think I saw you at 3 a.m., and I think you were still there at 6 a.m. when I got up. Let me ask you if I am summarizing the tactical difference angle of your fellow Republicans. The tactical strategy difference is you guys have your strategy. Their difference is we're going to get the Democrats on the record voting again for Obamacare, which they're already on the record doing. And then if you put us in power in 2014, in January 2015, we might be able to do something because then we'll have the House and the Senate. But Obama's still president. Am I surmising that right?
Well, yeah, and to the extent that you are, I think there are some holes in that strategy. We can't just assume that we can leave these things in place and all of a sudden be able to roll them back. You see, these are big new entitlement programs, and once they kick in, the historical antecedents for all these things have suggested that they are not going to go away. We have never, ever in our history, Sean, rolled back a new major entitlement program once it's kicked in.
I was corrected by a friend of mine. I think we did in 1988, and it had to do, remember Dan Rostenkowski getting his car windows beaten on by old people?
Yes, but that was a relatively minor program within Medicare, and it was still in the beginning implementing phases. Within just a few months, Congress acted. But again, that was not a new major program. It was a sub-program within Medicare. And this is very different. This is a whole new order of magnitude, and it's something that we're not likely to be able to walk away from once it's implemented.
Senator Inhofe, conservatives are pretty angry. It seems like they really wanted all the senators to stand with Ted Cruz, as you did. Brent Bozell actually put out a statement that says, you fund it, you own it. What's your reaction to that?
Well, you know, I think that's right. There are 14 of us that met about 10 weeks ago. I think that's right, Mike. And we decided whatever we had to do, for as long as we had to do it, we're going to do everything we can to stop. Let's keep in mind, Sean, and nobody talks about this, if you read what Harry Reid's statement was, he admits this is a single-payer system that we'll be going to, which is socialized medicine. So we need to do everything we can. Let me just suggest this. I said this on the floor last night and again this morning. It's not really over yet, because I can remember so well 19 years ago, I think that was back in your Hannity and Combs days, but 19 years ago we had Hillary Healthcare. And Hillary Healthcare, they said at this point, it's impossible, we can't win, it's over, and yet we won. In fact, they were so sure that we could not win this thing 19 years ago that the AMA had a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal supporting Hillary Healthcare. But we won. So you just don't give up on something like this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I think some things are worth fighting for, and this is so... If Republicans believe that this is really bad for the country, Senator Lee, it seems like this is worth fighting for. The one obstacle that maybe I'm reading into it, but what I perceive to be the big obstacle is fear, and the fear of being blamed for a shutdown. if they take this stand. I don't see that same fear on the Democrat side. Is that fair?
I think that's probably a fair characterization. You didn't see that same fear on the Democrats' side when you had then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi going to her members and with tears in her eyes pleading with them to do this, stating that this was something that she deeply believed in. They did take a lot of risk in passing this law, and that risk actually came forward, and it ended up having some political consequences, and they got what they wanted. Now, in this circumstance, I think if we do the right thing, I think if we fight hard, I think if we stop it, it'll inure to our political benefit and not to our detriment. Yeah. I think we need to believe strongly in these principles, and I think we need to do everything we possibly can to prevent this law from taking effect.
Yeah. Senator Inhofe, let me ask you both of you one last question. Assuming now that they're going to vote for cloture, Harry Reid strips out the defunding provision, sends it back to the House. Let's say the House stands strong. What happens then?
Well, what I think the House would do would be to look at it and see what can we do that is something short of what we are trying to do, and to see what they'll buy onto. And frankly, I just think that, you know, the key would be the next vote we have could keep them from being able to do this on a simple majority. And that's kind of what it's all about. So I just figure if we have an opportunity here, I've got 20 kids and grandkids, we want to stop socialized medicine. It's worth doing everything to the last minute.
Yeah. Mike Lee, I'll give you the last word. What happens if it goes back to the House, having been stripped of the defund provision?
Well, that would be unfortunate, and the one way that we could salvage that moment would, of course, be if we still stood strong as a party. If the House of Representatives at that point stood strong and said, we're still not going to fund Obamacare's implementation. We're going to stand by defunding. We might add different language to it. We might experiment with different numbers or different formulations of the continuing resolution. But we're going to stand steadfastly behind this idea that we want to fund government while defunding Obamacare to protect the American people from socialized medicine.
All right, guys, thank you very much for being with us. Now, when we come back, we have a very lively studio audience over there, anxious to dive into this. When we come back, we're going to find out what they think of all of this and much, much more straight ahead. And welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. We bring back our live studio audience for more reaction. All right, let's assume the Senate has punted. Now it's going to go back to the House. The defund provision is going to what, Ms. Reid?
Please.
The defund provision is going to be stripped. Dr. Siegel, what should the House do? What will they do?
Well, I think we have to continue to fight with the idea that this bill is not helping America's doctors or patients. And I think even in this panel tonight, we've totally lost sight of what's actually going on in the doctor's office here, Sean. Doctors are the drivers of the bus. We keep loading the bus with more and more people, right? Pre-existing conditions, let's give that out. You know, let's give more preventive services. Everybody gets a mammogram for free, a colonoscopy for free. But who's ordering these tests? We have a doctor shortage. We got no tort reform. We have no portability. This is not a workable law. This is a sham, this law.
So this is going to become like England. National Health Services, government.
It's going to be rationing. It'll be rationing. It'll be rationing of services. Rationing.
To answer your original question, and what probably is going to happen is that the House is going to pass a clean CR, fund the government for about one more week, and they're going to punt the debate about defunding Obamacare to the debate about raising the debt ceiling, which is better for them. It's something that Americans tend to see more like, well, yeah, shoot, don't raise the debt ceiling. So they tend to be, that could be more favorable for them looking forward to the 2014 election.
They may also fight for the individual mandate, too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Dr. Siegel makes an important point. Tactically, the Republicans are much better off putting forward popular provisions that were in the Republican bill originally, like portability, like interstate purchasing. Yes. Let the Democrats vote against it, and then when they're defeated, you have issues to run on, the credibility is there, and the party's numbers will stay strong.
But you know what the problem is? I'll throw it to Deneen. I hear what you're saying, and you're always the great pragmatist, and I admire you for that. But the problem is, not only is it the law of the land, Obamacare, it is now the implemented law. And I think, as Senator Mike Lee said, you're not going to get rid of it.
But, Sean, Rand Paul made a great point here. Rand Paul just made a great point to you. And he's a practicing ophthalmologist, actually. Why not introduce these things as amendments? And Doug just made the same point. Right. Portability, tort reform. But that's what the Republicans should be saying. They made a great stand.
They have added a companion legislation that would have $20,000 tax exemption for families,
Free market
$7,500,
yes.
free market, portability, bring it across state lines, bring it job to job. Yeah.
You know what? I think the Senate needs to vote on what the House has provided. They provided the bill. If they don't pass, if Obama wants to shut down the government, that's on his watch. They need to vote. Constituents need to see where the senators stand, especially those in the red states like Mary Landrieu, where they stand. They need to go on record. They need to be outed to see where they stand, especially those who are up for election next year.
All right, yeah, real quick.
Breaking news today, the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, the conservative alternative to the AMA, voted unanimously to file a lawsuit to halt the implementation of this law. Based on the fact that what the president is seeking to implement is not the Affordable Care Act. As we discussed last time, it is the Affordable Care Act where the president has unilaterally stripped it of the employer mandate, income verification, caps on out-of-pocket expenses.
Tamara's making faces.
Wait a second. One half of all the deadlines in the law, and then crammed in 1,472 waivers and a special entitlement for members of Congress. It is not the law of the land.
Wait, Sean,
hang on.
I do hallucinate. I'm accused by Jennifer of, being drunk, by other conservatives of being drunk.
I want to listen to her. I want to be drunk if I have to listen to Tamara, because it's like too much for one human being to bear.
Then leave. So
it's like
because guess what?
Rapists. It's like unbelievable. No, I want to be drunk.
All this. Come back. More with our studio audience right after the break. Stay with us. And we'll continue with our live studio audience. Tamara Holder, take it away. What were you saying?
Well, I just find it interesting that Betty has this argument about
Betsy
McCoy,
I'm sorry, author of Beating Obamacare.
Nice plug, nice plug. We set this up. But no, I think it's interesting that the breaking news is that there's a filing in the court, which actually Obamacare went to the Supreme Court, and it was ruled to be a legal law of the land. Wait, let me just point and tell you that this is legal, and the conservatives are hurting themselves. The Republican Party is hurting itself.
But wait a second.
Wait,
hang on a second.
You don't know what the suit is about.
Wait a minute. Fox News alert. Tamara has advice for the conservative movement.
No. The problem is, I just don't understand, Sean. I don't understand why the other conservatives are not talking about, let's see, 9.5% of corporations pay their corporate income taxes.
Well, I think one thing that the Republicans should absolutely be talking about is, number one, there are a number of points that have been made by the Democrats and the Republicans in this group that talk about the personal impact of Obamacare on people's life. And the second thing I think we should be talking about, and I said it before, is the sequestration, to show that we won a battle last year. We actually got the government cut back by 2%. That's not a lot. The president is now quietly threatening a shutdown if that continues to hold. That was his idea to begin with.
We
have to start focusing on that.
Really quick thing is that, remember, 2014 is coming up. Republicans are set to win. We're going to win very big. And we have to remind voters constantly that Democrats cannot be the party of the worker if everyone's getting unemployed.
Julie, go ahead.
You're preaching to the Republican base, and that's all you're preaching to. You're not preaching to independents, all of whom do not want a shutdown. You are not preaching to the people that actually are affected in a positive way about this.
70% of America doesn't want this bill.
23% support a shutdown. The rest support augmenting this bill.
That's one poll, but I can cite you Rasmussen. Which
but Sean, go ahead.
You said it in all your questions. You asked Rand Paul and Mike Lee, where are the other Republicans? They need to get their blue paint on their face, be Braveheart. Longshanks butchered William of Wallace, took out his intestines. But in the long run, guess what? Scotland was free. We must be free of people like this and people like that. We got to be free.
No, it's not. Scotland
free of people like that.
Hang on, Jimmo.
With all due respect to Senator Paul, when he says it's time for them to stand up, it's actually time for them to sit down, shut up, and realize that what they are doing is malpractice on our economy, and they need to get back to governing. But at the same time, go ahead as a Democrat, because you are ruining your chances of the White House, of winning any House of Congress.
70% of Americans
Latino
don't want
voters will never vote for Republicans
Anybody who listened to Ted Cruz's speech heard him talk about the real policy implications of Obama. Then I got to sit here and listen to someone call him a terrorist when my generation of Iraq and Afghanistan vets fought real terrorists who really are, and you're going to stand here and call Senator fighting on principle a terrorist. Let me tell you something. I run a veterans organization. We've dealt with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Your show has talked about the Department of Veterans Affairs, some of the failures failures there, the backlogs, the paperwork. Guess what? Veterans have seen Obamacare. It's called the Department of Veterans Affairs. Some of the care you get is great, but the paperwork, the barriers, the implications is what the American people will see from Obamacare.
Thank you for your service, but the real impact Obamacare has on the American people are the 100 million people who are no longer going to have lifetime caps.
I like this guy.
Half of Americans who have pre-existing conditions.
Wait a second. Hang on. We're almost out of time.
Let me ask you a question. Have already benefited from this law, so don't deny its positive impact.
She won't quiet down.
Deny the negative impact.
There are different
I like this guy.
I want to ask you this question.
Yeah.
So you're saying how badly our vets have been treated in veterans hospitals is what America is going to experience?
It's more so the barriers to entry. A lot of vets love the care they get once they get in there, but it's the barriers between them and their doctor, the paperwork, the waits, the bureaucracy, and a lot of that is what we're going to see through Obamacare. Go ahead, Kirsten.
I think what we've seen evidence by tonight is that America is sick of this infighting, and what Ted Cruz did last night was he showed that he was an inspirational leader. He was someone who could unite the Republican Party again, and that's what we need. That's what Democrats don't want, and that's what they need, is an inspirational leader who can provide actual solutions, real solutions. We agree.
Thank you all. Give yourselves a hand. And that is all the time we have left this evening. As always, thank you for being with us. Let not your heart be troubled. Greta's next to go on the record. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.